Thank you, Senator Fuller. Senator Block.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise as the chair of Budget Sub 1, where about half of the budget passes. I rise to thank my vice chair, the senator from Orange County, because contrary to what we've heard from a couple of members, he had a huge impact on the budget. There was no shortage of input. He was inputting all the time, and his input was taken very seriously, and his input mattered. And the governor, to his credit, made great changes from his initial January budget offering to his May revise, partly because of the input of members of both parties who serve on Budget Sub 1. So we as a legislature have a great impact. We should not abrogate our responsibility and say, well, the governor says this is what the budget is, so this is what the budget should be. The negotiations will continue. That's right. They're not over yet. But that's our role. That's what we're here to do, to negotiate for our constituents to get the best budget we can get. Now, is it going to be perfect? Of course not. In Budget Sub 1, I would have loved to see more resources going to the University of California, more resources going to the California State University. But we have a very limited pot. And with our collegial work as a budget subcommittee, we, I think, have done fairly well by the CSU and the UC. But we're all constrained by the group that benefited most in Budget Sub 1 this year, and in fact, in the entire budget. And that is because 30 years ago, the people of California voted their feeling that K-12, K-14 was probably the most important part of what we do as a state. The training of students, our young students from kindergarten through 12th grade through community colleges was one of the most important roles of the state. Frankly, if you look at the most important anti-poverty program in the state, the most important anti-crime program in the state, the most important civics education program in the state, the most important economic engine in the state, it is our free public education. So thanks to the voters who passed Prop 98 nearly 30 years ago, we have this year seen a real windfall for our K-14 schools, which means our students, our parents, our communities. And now the job is for those who are benefiting from Prop 98, which is all of us ultimately, but the schools in particular, to show that with the dollars they're getting this year, they can do great things for the state of California. And that's my challenge to them. And again, my thanks to my colleagues on Budget Sub 1 for the fine job they've done this year in putting together a very important part of the budget.
Thank you, Senator Block. Senator Huff.
Thank you, members. First, I'd like to thank the Chair Leno, Vice Chair Nielsen, certainly all the members of the Budget Committee, having been Vice Chair of that before. I know it's no small challenge to wrestle with this thing we call our state priorities and the state budget. And also thanks to the staff that worked tirelessly to make sure we have the information necessary to make hopefully informed decisions. I think we've had a very robust conversation. I know there's some more speakers after me, but I always take exception to some things that just hang out there and go uncontested. So a couple things I would like to just put out there as markers that perhaps is a different view on this budget than what has been presented. One quote was that this budget is significantly lower than population inflation than pre-recession overall. Well, let me give you two things. First of all, our total spending is $15 billion more than last year. If you look at overall spending, not just the general fund, we usually focus on the general fund. You look at overall spending, it's up at $269 billion or so now, which is, you know, no small chump change, $15 billion higher than last year. If you go back to 98, 99 budget year, which was the last time we had a normal cycle before we had the dot-com boom and bust, and then the last 12 years or so that many of us have lived through, and you look at all of that, we are actually significantly higher than population growth in inflation. And then when you throw in the 2015-16 budget includes $12 billion of spending from funds that have been shifted from the general fund in the past. So you really can't compare apples to oranges we had $7.2 billion from realignment that we shifted out of the general fund. Remember that? $2.1 billion of Medi-Cal-related special taxes and cost shifts, $1.1 billion from the dissolution of redevelopment agencies, another $1.2 billion from transportation weight fees to fund debt service, and $534 million of federal temporary assistance to needy families money to fund Cal grants. So when you start comparing apples to apples, it's a little different picture that comes into place. So I think the backdrop I would like to say is, yes, a budget does fund your priorities. But is our priority of this legislature, of this body in the Capitol and the Assembly and the governor, to ramp up expenses to the point that it's unsustainable the next time we have an economic downturn? I would say that's the cruelest thing you can do to the working poor in this state, is to give them something only to cut them out later on and they become dependent upon it once again. I mean, many of you, like me, have lived through this is my 11th year now, but it was tough times. And it's tough to cut programs, and even we fiscal conservative Republicans have pain when we have to cut programs, but let's not ramp them up so quickly that it can't be sustained, and I think that's where the governor's coming from. You know, there was some comments that this budget puts more aside to rainy day fund than the governor's budget. Well, sure, when you gin up the revenues more than what may be fiscally prudent, you're going to have more money to dole out to your buddies and to programs that may not be sustained later on. So it's $2 billion more than the governor says is prudent. Well, sure, you can put more money aside in a rainy day, but let's not, fool ourselves with phony numbers and things. Let's underestimate our revenues, overestimate our expenses, and then next year we can plan on spending what's in the bank rather than what might come and then have to deal with that later on. I think this budget spends too much. I think we need to rein it in. And clearly, we don't have the fully cooked picture. I've heard it's only 0.8 of 1% in disagreement, but in real numbers, that's like $2 billion. I don't know where the percentages come from, but I know this is overspending what the governor says is prudent by $2 billion. So as we have to do amendments down the road, and certainly the implementation, it may be the how, but if we don't have a complete package, we don't really have a complete budget. And I'm not going to vote for this today because I don't think it's fully cooked.
Thank you, Senator Huff. Senator Pan.
Thank you, Madam President, members. I'm pleased to stand in support of this budget. I just want to touch on a couple of things, though, and really in perspective of how do we expand the capacity of our economy, how do we expand jobs in our state. And I'll just touch on a couple of areas in this budget, I think, where there's opportunities that the budget gives us opportunities there. And I, again, also want to thank our chair of the budget committee and the process by which we went about doing this. So let's just touch on Medi-Cal. Clearly, we've already heard testimony that Medi-Cal is covering a good portion of Californians, and by providing them the health care that actually helps them in their ability to be able to actually go to work and be productive and actually help stimulate our economy. I also point out that the money that we're putting into Medi-Cal, we get at least 50% match, if not more, for the expansion population. This is money that actually we as taxpayers here in the state of California, we pay our federal taxes. We actually are a donor state, and we should be getting more of our share back. And this is one way to do that. And that money will go to people who work in California. And healthcare, we're not getting health care imported from other places. It's going back to people who work in California. So we're actually creating jobs in California to help Californians be more productive. And we're also bringing in more money from outside the state. Our money that our state put out, we're bringing it back into our state. So I don't, one can argue whether we're doing enough in that area, but certainly this budget takes a step forward there. I also just want to briefly touch also on early childhood education as well. This is, again, money that's going to increase the capacity of parents of those kids to be able to work, as well as, of course, increasing the capacity of those children to be productive citizens as well. If there's any time to invest in the future of California and to invest in our economy, to invest in our people, it is now. And this is what this budget takes a step in doing. Does it do enough there? Well, we have to work within the constraints of our economy. Our budget is tied to our economy. As we grow our economy, our budget can grow. But this is at least a step forward in doing that direction, and I, again, recommend that we vote aye on this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pan. Mr. President Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. Madam President, colleagues, on May 14th, the governor submitted his May revision, which is the governor's vision of our budget for the whole state of California. Today is June 15th, and today we submit our vision of a budget for the state of California. I want to thank, I know it's been said already on numerous occasions, but I want to thank our great chair of the Budget Committee, our conferees on both sides of the aisle, both Democratic as well as Republican side. I want to thank our wonderful budget sub-chairs who've done an amazing job. I also want to thank the Republican leadership and soon-to-be Republican leader for their collaboration and cooperation. I think by far and large, the process has been highly transparent for everyone to internalize and to get into the weeds of this measure. So this is how our constitutional system works between the executive branch and the legislative branch. This is not ruled by fiat. This is not a monarchy. We don't treat whoever occupies the executive office, whether it's our current governor, then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Gray Davis, or Pete Wilson, or any other governor as a deity. This is a co-equal branch of government. And what we submit today, again, is a reflection of our values. It's a reflection of the hard work that started in our subcommittees and was vetted out through the conference committee that was reflective of both political parties that make up this wonderful legislative body, the California State Senate. So constitutionally, what we do is we collaborate and we cooperate with the executive branch. We do not submit ourselves to the executive branch and say, whatever it is that you want, we do. This is not a monarchy. This is the constitutional system that we have in the state of California. And therefore, what we have, I think, is an excellent budget. It was stated here on several occasions, we pay down the debt in higher numbers. We put more money in the reserves as well as the rainy day fund. We make incredible investments in higher education, especially the Cal State University system, the workhorse of the state of California. We make a solid commitment. We make a solid commitment, both policy-wise and fiscally, to ECE, early childhood education. A real commitment to the bookends. If you're young, we want to make sure, before you get to kindergarten, that you have a head start, you have a running start, particularly if you're marginalized based on the color of your skin or your zip code, that you have a fighting chance. Whether you're poor and an immigrant in the Central Valley, whether you're poor and an immigrant or African American or Asian American or white in an urban area, in a rural area in Riverside, San Bernardino, or elsewhere. We want to make sure you have a fighting chance. So when you are sitting at your desk in kindergarten, it's nothing that you're seeing for the first time, that you know your colors, you know how to count, you know your ABCs, you're ready to learn. That's why ECE and these investments are absolutely critically important. It's not taking care of children. It's a strategic investment for the growth of this economy of the state of California. We invest more than $10 billion, K through 12, Prop 98, K through 14, I should say. And the other bookend on higher education, UCs as well, especially the CSU, we make a great investment. So this is a bookends investment for economic sustained growth for the state of California. EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit. We reward hardworking people at the lower economic strata. Not just corporations, not just those who are very wealthy, but hardworking individuals. Those who work in the Central Valley, who get up at the crack of dawn to pick those fields, to put the food on our table. Those hardworking individuals in Riverside and San Bernardino who work those construction jobs, who work those factory jobs day in and day out to make ends meet. Those hardworking individuals in urban areas, whether you're Oakland, Los Angeles, San Diego, or elsewhere. EITC. So we make some investments so we can return and recoup that investment back into our economy for consumer goods so folks can spend. That keeps small businesses intact in the state of California. So this is an excellent budget. Now, is this going to be our final budget? Unlikely. Unlikely. But we have very, very productive, very collaborative conversations, negotiations with the governor. What we're doing today is we're fulfilling our constitutional obligation to our constituents and to the state of California by submitting our vision of our budget to the executive branch. And as a result, like has happened in the last 3 out of the last 4 years, we will continue our conversations. And they have been quite productive and quite constructive. So again, I want to thank our budget chair, to our conferees, both on the Democratic as well as the Republican side, to the hardworking staff, subcommittee staff, budget staff, Democratic as well as the Republican staff. Now, clearly we have differences of opinion in our vision, and that's to be expected. That's why you're Republicans, and that's why we are Democrats. And that's a good thing. Differences is a good thing. It provides a contrast, a juxtaposition that we fight for our values, and you represent your constituents and vice versa. So with that, I want to thank again all of our colleagues, Democrats as well as Republicans. We will continue working very hard, and this will be finalized very, very soon. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator De Leon. Any further debate or discussion? Seeing none, Senator Leno, you may close.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I think this very comprehensive debate, conversation, deliberation on our budget only manifests the fact that we're all engaged in the process and all invested in the success and future of California. I did hear a few surprising things in our debate. I'll touch on just a few. I think we could all agree we're all entitled to our own opinions, but not to our own facts. To say or even suggest that there is something untrue or sham about this budget is reckless, it's irresponsible, it's absolutely, totally, and 100% inaccurate. It does a disservice to the very thorough democratic process that has brought us to the floor today. Proposition 25 in our Constitution, and I'll spare you a repeat of the Pro Tem's very articulate civic reminder, requires us to pass a budget that's balanced, a legislative budget that's balanced by June 15th. That's the bill before us today. I heard another colleague suggest that, well, if you gin up your revenues to give away to your buddies, let me just remind you, the legislature's budget reflects the LAO's revenues, independent, nonpartisan, legislative analyst office's revenues. The same legislative analyst office's revenues that have been more accurate than Department of Finance's in recent years. No one is ginning up any revenues. And if you're suggesting that the buddies to whom we're giving this away include the bipartisan support we have had through this very comprehensive process to restore cuts to Medi-Cal providers that we have made in recent years, to restore cuts to early care and education that we have made in recent years, for the benefit of our developmental disabilities community who has suffered cuts in recent years, for the restoration of Denti-Cal services that we have cut, for CalWORK supportive housing that we have cut, for the University of California and for the California State University system and our public education system, well, then let's be honest and admit they're all of our buddies. It's also curious to me that one side of this debate takes issue with the revenues, but then is all too pleased to be able to spend on the things I've just mentioned. It's more than disingenuous to suggest you can do one without the other. So I'll just close by reminding everyone this is a soundly fiscal, responsible budget. It does put more into our rainy day fund. It does pay down debt further than the governor's proposal. It does invest further in public education and all of the other programs I have just mentioned. It is real, it is true, and it is constitutional. And I challenge anyone to suggest otherwise. I ask you for a vote.
Thank you, Senator Leno. All debate having ceased, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen? Aye. Anderson? Bates? No. Bell? Aye. Berryhill? No. Block? Aye. Cannella? No. De Leon? Aye. Fuller? No. Gaines? No. Galgiani? Aye. Glazer? Aye. Hall? Aye. Hancock? Aye. Hernandez? Aye. Hertzberg? Aye. Hill? Aye. Hueso? Aye. Huff? No. Jackson? Aye. Lara? Aye. Leno? Aye. Leva? Aye. Liu? Aye. McGuire? Aye. Mendoza? Aye. Mitchell? Aye. Monning? Aye. Morlock? No. Morrell? No. Wynn? No. Nielsen? No. Pan? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Roth? Aye. Runner? No. Stone? No. Vidak? No. Wykowski? Aye. Wolk? Wolk, aye.
Please call the absent members.
Anderson?
Ayes 26, noes 13. The conference committee report is adopted.